my main job is being a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, in which I practice mostly psychotherapy with some medications, and then I mix that with alternative medicine, which includes acupuncture and homeopathy. And then I run this Cooper Mountain Vineyards. Grapes are a lot like human beings in that when they're real young, they don't show the same maturity that an older vine or older person might show. And so the grapes become much more elegant and sophisticated and balanced, as human beings usually do too, as they get older. Then, of course, at some point in life, or an age of a vine, they start fading. My growth as a doctor and as a farmer and a winemaker kind of had gone back and forth and fed each other. As an example, I know in this very plot here, in the early 1980s, we were using some chemicals that were available and used to keep the birds off these grapes. We would apply them to the grapes just fairly close to the harvest. And what would happen with that is that the birds would eat it and they would eventually vomit because it affected their nervous systems. We were all told that these chemicals disappear. You know, you don't pick. There was a certain time, about 10 days, that you don't pick for. And then Canada decided that they were going to measure the amount that was left in the wine, which none of us even thought about because we were told it was all gone. And then they ended up making some standards, and eventually they banned the substance because it was a neurotoxin. And it was a neurotoxin just not for birds, it turns out. It turned out it was a neurotoxin for human beings too. That knowledge in my mind, that came from agriculture. Learning about the birds and what it does, and then of course realizing that they would even banned it in Canada, and the United States hadn't even thought about banning it. Got me to thinking, of course, about, well, how does that affect our health all the time? And what are these tiny little substances that, amounts that we don't pay much attention to? These small amounts of chemicals that the big companies say, just trace amounts. What kind of effect can they have? And I think it was from there that then I started studying that as a doctor, realizing it doesn't take very much of anything to make major changes to the body system, immune system. I began kind of studying that side of medicine and trying to minimize the amount of medicines I was using. And then I came upon homeopathy, which is really, in a way, acknowledging that trace amounts of something that can have a huge effect on the body system in a good way, if they're natural substances and they're selected correctly, as opposed to the man-made chemicals that can be in these tiny amounts too that can do some damage. So I became very aware of that and realized that that same system for the human being in homeopathy had been used in agriculture by Rudolf Steiner in what was called biodynamic farming, in which he had actually taken some of those homeopathic substances and sprayed them on the plants. And they were substances from nature, such as quartz and valerian and dandelion and oak and horsetail. And he noticed that spraying them on the plants increased the balance and the strength of the plants and made them more resistant to disease. And so as that was going on, then again in my medical way of looking at things, it became more apparent to me to focus more on the prevention of disease by strengthening the organism, which is what biodynamics does to the plant. That's what really alternative medicine does. It makes the body stronger, it enhances the immune system, and then it naturally fights off diseases without the bullets that are used in traditional medicine and in agriculture, the chemicals or the drugs. And so back and forth, that's how my mind developed in terms of treating plants and people pretty much the same, trying to put them in balance, trying to not get away from the stress idea, but put the mild stress on the system so it builds up its own immune system, and that basically through organics and through biodynamics is how we've evolved here in the vineyard.